If you're empty, you're ready. That's what nobody told you. That's what they didn't want you to realize. Because this world is obsessed with full hands, full schedules, full accounts, full resumes, full followers, full applause. But let me tell you something. They can keep all of that. Because when you're full of everything but your purpose, all you're doing is carrying weight that doesn't belong to you. But when you're empty, now you're ready for a pouring. You've been crying about being empty, but what you don't see is that the emptiness is a setup. That's the blessing right there. Don't run from it. Don't resent it. Don't numb it. That emptiness is the preparation ground for power, for purpose, for transformation. Because only empty vessels can be filled. Only broken ground can produce a harvest. Only surrendered hearts can carry the weight of destiny. Let me talk to the ones who feel like they have nothing left. You've given all you had to the relationship. You've poured into a dream that didn't pour back. You've been faithful to a job that overlooked you. You've carried people who wouldn't carry you back. And now you feel like you're scraping the bottom of your soul, wondering, is there anything left in me? And I came to tell you, yes, there is. There is something divine about your emptiness. There is something sacred about your lack. Because the moment you realize you're empty is the moment you become available. You've been too full to be filled, too busy to be blessed, too distracted to be developed. But now you're empty. And now you're ready. You see, sometimes God has to empty you of what you want so he can fill you with what you need. That's why the relationship didn't work. That's why the business failed. That's why the friend walked away. That's why the door closed. Not because you weren't enough, but because you were too full. Full of your own ideas, your own plans, your own expectations. And now you're ready for the upgrade. Now you're ready for the elevation. Because God can't bless who you pretend to be. He can't heal who you're acting like. He waits until you come to the end of yourself. He waits until you say, I can't do this by myself anymore. That's when heaven leans in. That's when power starts to move. Not when you're striving, but when you're surrendering. And I know empty doesn't feel good. It doesn't look good. It's humbling. It's silent. It's lonely. But emptiness is the womb of creation. Ask the widow who only had a jar. She didn't need more oil. She needed more emptiness. Vessels, the oil kept flowing. You want the oil? Bring the emptiness. You want the anointing? Bring the lack. You want the breakthrough? Stop pretending you've got it all together and show up empty. There is a kind of power that only flows when you've got nothing left but your obedience. Nothing left but your hunger. Nothing left but your yes. See, the world teaches you to hide your empty places, but the kingdom says, show them. The kingdom says, blessed are the poor in spirit. The kingdom says, my strength is made perfect in your weakness. Not your performance, not your perfection, not your pedigree, your emptiness. You've been praying for strength, but you've been praying with your fists clenched. You've been asking for healing, but hiding your wounds. You've been crying for direction, but holding on to your map. And God says, I don't need your GPS. I need your emptiness. I don't need your plan. I need your permission. He's not asking you to figure it out. He's asking you to be available. Because being ready has nothing to do with having everything in place. Being ready means being willing. It means being positioned. It means being humble enough to receive. You've been trying to prove your worth, but God's not asking for your worth. He's asking for your willingness, and nothing says willing like empty. Don't you understand? You're in a place of favor. You're in a position of power. The enemy thought he could break you by draining you, but all he did was prepare you. All he did was prepare you. All he did was make space. All he did was clear the room for a miracle. And now that you've got nothing left, now that you're running on empty, now that your heart is open and your plans are wrecked and your pride is shattered, now you're finally in the right position. Because he uses the foolish things. He uses the forgotten. He uses the broken. He uses the overlooked. He uses the empty. Why? Because when it works, no one can say you did it. No one can say it was your talent, your money, your connections, your hustle. No, when it happens, they'll say, surely this was the hand of God. And isn't that what you really wanted all along? So stop running from the emptiness. Stop trying to fix it with distractions and noise and scrolling and numbing. Sit with it. Embrace it. Lift your hands with nothing in them. Walk by faith with no map. Stand in front of the door with no key. And watch what happens when you let go of what you thought you needed and become available for what you were created for. You're not forgotten. You're not forsaken. You're not too late. You're not disqualified. You're just empty. And that means you're finally ready. Ready to be filled. Ready to be healed. Ready to be used. Ready to be poured into until you overflow. Because in the kingdom, your emptiness is not a sign of failure. It's the starting line of favor. Emptiness is not punishment. It is preparation. That's the truth most people miss while they're walking through the dark valleys of life. We've been conditioned to believe that lack means failure. That if you're running low on energy, money, confidence, clarity, that somehow you did something wrong. But in the divine equation, emptiness is often the very sign that you're on the edge of something transformational. It's not the end of the road, it's the beginning of construction. It's where the rebuilding starts, where the reshaping takes place, where you're no longer operating off of your own strength, but you're now open to receive what was always greater than you. We like to talk about being full of life, full of purpose, full of plans. But fullness without divine direction is just noise. It's movement without meaning. Some people are so full of distractions, full of pride, full of noise, full of validation seeking, that they leave no room for growth. But emptiness says, I've tried everything I know. I've poured out all that I had. I've reached the limit of what I can carry on my own. And that's exactly when preparation begins. Because when you are full of yourself, your systems, your formulas, and your ideas, there's no room for a miracle. But when you're empty, when you're stripped, surrendered, exposed, now you're usable. There's a reason why seeds don't grow on concrete. The soil has to be broken. It has to be turned over, disturbed. Emptiness does that. It's the hardened places of the heart, disturbs the routines, disrupts the ego, and makes room for a new root system. You don't plant something new on top of old harvest. You clear the land. That's what your emptiness is doing. It's clearing away what's no longer serving you. It's removing the clutter, the confusion, the counterfeit comfort. It's making space for what's real, what's divine, what's deeply rooted in purpose. And while you're feeling like you've lost everything, what you've really lost is the excess, the noise, the distractions. You didn't lose your purpose. You lost what was blocking it. You didn't lose your value. You lost the applause that made you forget where your value really came from. That space you feel, that ache, that's not absence. That's alignment. That's preparation. You're being pulled back like a bow, stretched in silence, because something greater is about to be released through you. The emptiness is not a void. It's a vessel that's being carved out and hollowed with intention, so that when the time comes, you're not carrying old things in new seasons. You'll be carrying purpose, and it will fit perfectly because you made space for it. Only empty vessels can be filled. That's a principle as old as creation, but still misunderstood in a world obsessed with appearances. We live in a time where people walk around full of noise, full of ego, full of pretense, full of distractions that look like priorities, relationships that look like love, and habits that look like progress. But fullness in the wrong areas leads to stagnation. You can't receive what's meant for you when your hands are already gripping what was never yours to carry. You can't hold on to the old and expect the new to flow. Something has to be released. Something has to be emptied out. There's a difference between being full and being fulfilled. One comes from accumulation. The other comes from alignment. One is about image. The other is about identity. And so many people are chasing a full calendar, a full bank account, a full inbox, hoping it will fill the emptiness inside. But external fullness can't fix internal hollowness. In fact, it masks it. It keeps you busy enough to avoid facing the truth that deep down, you're craving something real, something pure, something divine. How much oil she had, he asked her how many empty vessels she could bring, because the oil didn't flow where there was fullness. The oil flowed wherever there was space, and the flow didn't stop until the emptiness did. That's not just a story, it's a pattern. Heaven moves according to capacity, not according to image. And capacity is born out of emptiness. When you show up full of your own plans, there's no room for divine instruction. When you're full of pride, there's no space for wisdom. When you're full of fear, there's no place for peace. But when you come before God with your heart laid bare, with your logic surrendered, with your desires crucified, that's when the pouring starts. That's when power begins to flow. Because now, you're not offering resistance. You're not negotiating your way through obedience. You're simply saying, "Here I am, Lord, empty and available." There is nothing more dangerous to the enemy than an empty vessel in the hands of God. Because that vessel is not distracted. That vessel is not driven by ego. That vessel is not chasing clout. That vessel is ready to be used, molded, filled, and sent. The world celebrates those who are full of themselves, but the kingdom raises those who are full of surrender. The ones who have emptied out their pride, their plans, their timeline. The ones who have said, "I don't need the credit, I just want to carry the power." Because the only place the oil flows is into the empty. The enemy can't defeat you, he only made space. That's the secret behind the pain, the betrayal, the setback, the loss. What you thought was destruction was actually construction. What you thought was rejection was redirection. What the enemy tried to use to drain you, God used to prepare you. The enemy can't defeat you. He only made space. The enemy can't defeat you. What you thought was destruction was actually constructive. What you thought was wasted, what you thought was different, and when you look back at everything that broke you, everything that emptied you, everything that shook you to your core, you'll begin to realize it didn't destroy you, it stripped you. And in the stripping, God made room. You cried when they left. You questioned everything when it fell apart. You were angry when the door slammed shut. But what if that heartbreak was the hand of God making space? What if that disappointment was His design? The enemy wanted to humiliate you, but instead, he helped you. He cleared out the counterfeit so the real could walk in. He exposed the weak foundation so you could build something that lasts. He took what you thought you needed so you'd discover what you actually need. You see, we don't grow in comfort. We grow without the applause. We grow in pressure. We grow in pain. We grow when we're forced to confront who we are without the props, without the applause, without the mask. And that's where the real transformation happens, in the emptiness. Because when you've lost what you leaned on, you learn to stand on what's eternal. When there's no backup plan, no safety net, no applause to chase, that's when you find your why. And that's when heaven starts moving on your behalf. The enemy is crafty, but he's not a creator. He can't stop purpose. He can only try to delay it. He can't close doors that God has opened. All he can do is try to shake your confidence so you walk away from what was meant for you. But here's the beauty. What he meant for evil, God turns for good. Every attack he launched only proved how valuable you are. He doesn't waste bullets on empty vessels. If you weren't carrying something powerful, he wouldn't come for you the way he does. If your voice didn't matter, he wouldn't try to silence it. If your future wasn't dangerous, he wouldn't work so hard to make you quit. But you didn't quit. You're still standing. Maybe bruised, maybe tired, maybe confused, but still standing. That's proof enough that grace was working even when you didn't see it. That's evidence that God was using the battle to build the space. He was clearing out the old wineskin so he could pour in new wine. And now, because of the enemy's attack, you have more capacity, more clarity, more hunger, more depth. You're not the same as you were before. You've been emptied, but you've also been made ready. The space the enemy created in your life is now the very space God is about to fill with glory, with power, and with purpose. This is the starting line of favor. Not when everything makes sense, not when your plans are working, not when the applause is loud or the path is clear. Favor doesn't wait until you feel qualified. It meets you when you're willing to move in spite of your emptiness. That's when the shift begins. Not when you feel ready, but when you are ready. And readiness in the kingdom doesn't look like confidence. It looks like surrender. It looks like brokenness. It looks like hands raised with nothing in them but a desperate yes. God never waited for perfection. He always moved when there was space, when there was hunger, when there was just enough faith to take one more step. The starting line of favor often looks like the finish line of your strength. That moment when you've run out of options, when your own wisdom has failed you, when your backup plans have collapsed, that's the point where heaven leans in. Because now you're not negotiating, you're not relying on your network or your knowledge, you're just open. And that openness, that availability, is what triggers divine acceleration. You were never meant to run this race full of baggage. That's why favor couldn't flow while you were holding on to everything. The stripping wasn't punishment, it was preparation. It was God making sure that when the blessing hits your life, you're not too entangled to carry it. You're not too attached to the familiar to walk in the extraordinary. The empty place in your life has become sacred ground. That low point where you almost gave up, that's where favor is about to explode. And here's the truth most people miss. Favor is not random. It's strategic. It looks for vessels. It looks for people who have been crushed enough to be compassionate, silenced enough to listen, emptied enough to be entrusted. You had to lose some things so you could handle what's coming. You had to walk alone so you could recognize the voice of God without the noise. You had to run out of strength so you could discover the power that's not yours, but flows through you. You're standing at the line. You may feel unprepared, but preparation didn't come from what you gained. It came from what you lost. It came through every tear you cried in silence, through every silent night you wrestled with doubt, through every closed door that forced you to grow. All of that was building you, stretching you, sharpening you. So now, even in your emptiness, you're exactly where you're supposed to be. That space inside you, that longing, that ache, it's not your weakness, it's your calling echoing back to you, waiting to be answered. This is not the aftermath of failure. This is the beginning of overflow. You are not behind. You are not forgotten. You are finally aligned. The path you're on doesn't start with applause. It starts with emptiness. And because you made space, favor is on the way. Not in theory, but in demonstration. So now you know, your emptiness was never a curse. It was a calling. It was never about what left you, but about what was getting ready to find you. The breaking, the silence, the stripping, it was all making room for something greater than you imagined. You're not behind schedule, you're not disqualified, you're not forgotten, you're right on the edge of divine outpouring. Because when you're empty, you're finally ready. Ready to be filled, ready to be used, ready to walk into the season that was always waiting on your surrender.